Hey, Peter, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Great, thank you. I'm with Peter Pardini, everybody, and he's an up-and-coming filmmaker. He's got a special project that's near and dear to my heart, and we're going to find out all about it in just a second. If you're listening on some sort of a podcast platform like Podbean or iTunes or anything like that, know that you can watch the video version of these on the YouTube channel, Michael Angelo Caruso on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the subscribe button and also that silver bell so that you're notified of new content. Peter, your recent project is so interesting to me because I am a lifelong fan of the band Chicago, and you've been like a professional, you've been documenting them for quite some time, yeah?
Yeah, it's 12 years now, which is crazy to think about. It's like they've been together 55 years and it's almost like one-fifth of their career, which doesn't seem right.
That's all right, man. They need somebody to get all this stuff documented. They're so legendary now. And I think three full films that you've done with them, full feature films.
Yeah, there's two movies and then there's several like concert films, and another one
Okay.
that's coming soon too. So yeah, just anything and everything Chicago.
All right. So tell us about the most recent one, which just came out. This is about how the band coped with COVID, right? Because you already have done a long retrospective that won a few awards, the Now More Than Ever piece.
Right. So this one was kind of a response to that. I mean, the funny thing about the last one coming out is it was the first 50 years of their career, and then everything changes so quickly with any touring band. I mean, you're going to have changes even if a band's been together for 8 years.
Yeah.
And I think that the last one did so well that they asked me if I would be interested in doing another one. And to be honest, I mean, I'm always in to do anything for these guys because they've given me my start and have been so loyal to me and great. But to be honest, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to make another full feature film. I don't know what it's going to be about. And as always with them, I'm always on the road filming, special events that they're doing. And ultimately, it was going to be about the 55th anniversary. But then COVID happened, and we realized that that was probably going to be the thrust, so to speak, of the movie. Um, and just documenting the process of getting through that. And that was almost the only time that they ever missed a year of touring in terms of like a calendar year. So it was kind of an interesting, compelling angle to tell
Yeah,
the
the
story.
longevity of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a spot in the film where a driver tells Pankow that you guys are the last thing going because they were in Vegas March 10 or 11, whatever that was in 2020 when everything shut down. And he makes like an incidental comment to Pankow that you guys were the last thing going on the strip. And it's hard to document this kind of stuff because there's entertainment going on all the time, but it's likely they were the last, literally the last band on stage, or at least the last night that bands were on stage.
They were the blast band because the reason we know that is that when they were about to go on stage on March 14th, 2020, it was at the Venetian, and the Venetian has this large underground like waiting room, and we were just in there, and everyone's on their phones and saying, "Oh, Boys to Men canceled. Oh, this person canceled."
Oh yeah.
And it came time for them to go on stage, and they went on, and then there's an intermission and they came off. And as I remember it, that was when this happened, when the promoter at the Venetian came up to them and said, "Oh yeah, you guys are the last band performing in the world right now." And obviously it's kind of tough to completely verify that. I'm sure if someone in Europe was like, "No, we were the last," but Europe was already shut down at that point.
Yeah, and
So
helps to be on West Coast time if you're going to get
West
technical
Coast
about it.
time. Yeah, so they went on at like 8 o'clock. So that's 11 on the East Coast. No one's playing at 1:30
But
in the morning when
yeah, even if you don't think of the title as literal, it's still a an amazing thing that happened.
talkative.
And then
Yeah,
this 55 years is amazing. You used the
it's hard to
first part.
imagine.
What's that?
It's hard to fathom
I
55 years.
know, I know. You used the first part of the film by necessity, I think, and I really enjoyed it, by the way. The first part has to set up some sort of retrospective, but it's really a condensed, a lot of cuts in that first 18 minutes.
Yeah, it for me, I was trying to think, what if someone hasn't seen the other documentary
That's right.
and they're coming into it and know nothing about Chicago, which I think almost everybody now at least knows the music, but people don't know the history. They're a faceless band.
That's right.
And I thought, because they're good friends with Joe Mantegna, and I've worked with him a few times, and I thought if we could get him to narrate the movie, that would be awesome. But then maybe we could do kind of like an abridged history of Chicago to start the movie to kind of bring in the story, but also a thematic element to have a through line through the movie. And I realized, since we were going to be dealing with COVID and how it was sort of an end and then ultimately a new beginning, that it would be good to focus on the idea of not knowing when things are going to end and fighting through anyways. And so that was the purpose of kind of opening the movie with how many changes had happened over 55 years, good and bad, and
Yeah.
segueing into current day.
And there were a lot of nice motifs woven into this tapestry too, like the change motif. There was a line that was used multiple times. Their lives were never the same again.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened when people were leaving, cycling out of the band, or they had changed the name of the band.
This is the end of Chicago as we know them. Yeah.
That's right. It, it's it's so interesting on many levels because we all, of course, grew up with the music, and then for those of us of a certain age, we talked about how the movie talks about how people age. I think is referenced a half dozen times that we're all mortal, and when is the last time? And of course, their hit single now is it Goodbye?
If this is goodbye.
If this is goodbye, that theme, when is goodbye for the last time? These guys, some of them are well into their 70s and still not retired, correct?
That's right. And even for myself, I mean, I'm a younger guy, but I started working with these guys when I was 23 and now I'm 36. So it's kind of that, even for me, I'm like, wow, almost all of my 20s and most of my 30s has been spent, you know, obviously doing other things, but the thing that I'm kind of known for at this point is working with Chicago and seeing, man, they've been together 43 years longer than that. And just the end of the last documentary was actually, I had asked all of them the same question about that very thing. Like, what if, let's say you guys do have a farewell tour and you guys are at the airport saying goodbye, will you ever see each other again? And it's a very evocative question because no one likes to think about it.
Right.
Um, but I think it's something that everybody can relate to. And, a lot of people I have heard over the years working for them saying, well, why couldn't this person have stayed in the band? Or why don't they invite them back? And it's, to me, it's kind of like, well, make an analogy out of it. How many jobs has anybody had that lasts longer than a certain amount of years? But if someone leaves a job, like, they don't usually come back. It ends up becoming like they're a touring act and they have to keep going. So it's in the very beginning of this film, they talk about how Jason, who I love, I mean, he was one of my earliest on the road, just mentors on the road. It didn't work out and he had to leave the band because they had tour dates. You know what I mean? He had to leave
Yeah.
for 3 or 4 months and they got a
Yeah.
new guy and it worked out and they moved forward.
Yeah.
So,
For those of you watching, we're going to take you through a few of the characters here. The principals, Jason Scheff played bass in the band for many, many years. He ended up playing, I think, more with the band than the original bassist, Peter Cetera.
oh yeah, 31 years, I think. I think he
Yeah.
started right before I was born, which is crazy to think.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know how, you've probably got some inside information. I don't know how much of this you're comfortable talking about, but my perception has always been Jason chafed a little bit at sacrificing a solo career to be in this faceless band. I don't know if that's true or not.
All I know from what Jason has told me in the past was that when he first came into the band, and this is in the last film too, he would always just say that he saw it as being in a top 40 band, which essentially they would even say that now in terms of just what they play. I mean, they play the music that people want to hear.
Right.
Um, and I mean, to be in a group for 31 years shows a high level of dedication. Um, and I just know that he played 100 shows a year with them. And at the beginning, I mean, obviously, I don't have like a personal reference towards it from when I was that age, because, like I said, he started when I was maybe negative age. And I think he just saw it as probably very difficult to replace somebody like Peter Cetera because of such a recognizable voice and kind of being at that point the face of the band. But yeah, I mean that was my experience with Jason.
I mean, just think about uh, running the math. If you're in a band that does 100 shows a year for 20 years and you play Make Me Smile every night, at some
Telling
point
the
you
truth,
go,
right?
there's got to be more to life. And I'm not sure, everybody leaves for different reasons. I know that uh, there are three originals still left in the band: Lee Loughnane, the trumpet player, Robert Lamm, the keyboard player, and also Pankow, James Pankow, the trombone player. Walt Parazaider was the fourth original. He left a little bit ago, well, maybe a little longer than a little bit ago, with heart problem maybe. And I read recently he may have other issues now.
Yeah, he left probably he was touring less and less over time. When I started with them in 2010, he was pretty consistent. Ray Herman was still filling in here and there,
Mm.
but at a certain point, I think Walt had a family history of heart problems, especially specifically with his dad. And
Yeah,
so I think that when they play these summer dates and it's pretty hot outside, he was it was more of a precautionary measure.
yeah.
Um, Being out in the heat for, I mean, even a few months ago, I was out with them in Dallas in June or July, I can't remember, and it was like I don't know how they're doing this up there,
And
but
Chicago does not tour lightly. When they hit the
no,
road, they hit the road.
they hit the road, and so, but then he just retired because of that, and
Yeah,
then yes, last year it was revealed that he has Alzheimer's, and
yeah. So
it's
sad to hear that.
very sad, but they still talk to him, and it's it's like Ray says in the movie, the guy who came out and replaced him. It's like we're all in some way or another headed towards something, and
Right.
it might be better for others than than others. It might be a better outcome for different people, but Walt's a great guy, and he was always very supportive and still very involved with people talking with him in the group, which is great.
Nice. One of the things I really liked about how you balance the film Last Band on Stage is because it's a faceless band, because there are 8 or 9 guys in the band now.
10.
10. You gave everybody some time, man. I got to know some of the players that don't normally do interviews or get interviewed because everybody wants to talk to what they call the originals. I thought that was really fun.
Thank you. I mean, I think that's what a lot of, I wouldn't say people get wrong about it, but the misconception, I think, publicly is that because there are three original members, that the other guys don't matter. And
Yeah.
I mean, we were just at a Grammy event a few weeks ago, and the guys, Robert, Lee, Jimmy, they were doing a Q&A with Joe Mantegna, and they spent most of the time talking about, the guitarist, bass player, the people in the group now who make that live performance what it is.
Yeah.
You don't see, you can't have a trumpet, a trombone, and a piano player playing a live show. It's a whole group. And the thing that's constantly amazed me is that throughout these 12 years, even with changes, either they never lose any of their abilities. Like they're either just as good or better than they were before.
Yeah.
And I guess it just comes down to being very easy to find someone who'd want to play with Chicago and tour, 110 dates a year.
Yeah.
Um,
Providing they got the chops.
well, that's what it requires. And
Yeah.
so for me, doing the movie, it only made sense to include everyone, even including like tour manager and people who make it happen, outside of the stage too. So
I enjoyed the bits with Peter Shivarelli, the band's manager. I thought he had retired, but maybe he just retired from being the tour manager.
oh no, he's probably on the phone 20 hours of the day working for Chicago, like to make sure there's two things Peter Shivarelli cares about in life. It's Chicago and Notre Dame football. And he's I just talked to him yesterday. He's the most rabid supporter of this group and the most loyal person I think I've ever met.
Yeah.
And they will all say that their career right now is due to a number of things: their ability to play, the people in the group, and Peter Shivarelli's dedication to getting things done.
Yeah.
Um, So he's great.
He'll be your next movie because I don't know if they did a movie about Shep. What was Alice Cooper's manager's name? Shep, was it Shep Gordon?
That sounds right. I know which documentary you're talking about.
But because of his longevity and all the stuff he had been through, it was so interesting. You could tie all in these topical events. You could probably do the same thing with Shivarelli at some point.
Oh, he was a walk on at Notre Dame football way back when with Era Parsegian.
Yeah.
There's a statue at the school where Era's being held up and Peter's in the statue. So he's had a kind of a really interesting life from just everything from that to now working as the manager for Chicago.
The movie is very good at touching all of the important aspects of Chicago, especially things that can be actively promoted. The Carnegie Hall live album is featured in the movie. Um, an animated feature that you did with Lee called
Yeah,
Robot Love, which I
that
really
was a
enjoyed.
COVID project.
And of course, there's a nod back to Now More Than Ever, um, and a TV like a scrapbook that you did. It's actually called Scrapbook of Chicago,
We made that
photography
right
book.
before the pandemic. We finished it right before the pandemic started. My brother
Yeah.
and I basically accumulated pictures from over the years and made a really cool like history of Chicago in picture form that it's kind of cool. On every page there's a date so that if I've noticed that a lot of Chicago fans, they remember dates that they first saw them, so it's like you can easily go and find the
Yeah.
era that you first fell in love with the group. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's called Scrapbook.
Where can people find the movie?
The movie is on iTunes, Amazon, Vimeo. I mean, pretty much everywhere you can find on demand. It's on cable providers if you search for it on your TV. And it's playing at certain theaters around the country this week, but it's a very limited theatrical release. But yeah, it's anywhere you can find and rent movies.
It seems to me the movie business has changed a lot. Instead of working through, say, a studio like MGM or Paramount, I'm seeing all these production companies rolled out in the credits, sometimes five and six of them. You never
Mm-hmm.
see their names again, almost like they were shell companies or something. I don't know anything here. I'm
Yeah.
just, I just marvel at all of the ways movies come out now. Did you find that that was a struggle cobbling together? And forgive me, I don't remember the name of the company that actually released yours.
So 6 years ago when we released the first one, it was a lot different. I wouldn't say easier. TV was still kind of a thing back then.
Okay.
So now, I mean, of course, TV is still a thing, but it's much more of the on-demand viewing. And so we had a company called FilmRise last time, and then they went and found distribution with the help of CAA to get CNN Films on board to show the movie, and that got like 2 million views, 2 million viewers, a nonstop promotion for it leading up to it. And this time around, it's like while airing on a national network like CNN would have still been great, it's just the landscape's changed so much. And the company we went with this time is Gravitas Ventures, who I had actually worked with
Gravitas.
before a few years ago and had success with on a film. Um, and they basically take your movie and they can just for you, they'll do all the work and put it out on every basically streaming platform there is. Um, and it's working in a different way. It's number one right now on music documentaries on Apple, and it's number two in all documentaries.
Wow.
So it's just a different mode of getting it in front of a lot of people. And then I think down the line it'll probably be on like airplanes and stuff like that. So I've always been of the mind that as long as eyeballs are seeing it, it doesn't matter if it's on national television or streaming and going to number one that way.
Yeah.
Still people seeing your movie.
And it seems to help to have a platform. This is the oldest formula in the book. A band doesn't really go on tour unless they have an album, unless you're Chicago, in which case you're evergreen.
Mm-hmm.
But I think now more than ever was a project that was almost like a companion event to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Was that the same timing?
Yes and no. So actually, it's kind of a reverse companion because we started making Now More Than Ever in May of 2013. And it was just me, my cinematographer, and an assistant cameraman. who, this is focus pulling, by the way, when I do that. We went out and shot most of the movie, I would say, from 2013 to 2015. And the end of the original cut was all of these luminaries in the movie, like David Foster, Clive Davis, Irving Azoff, saying, "It's a shame Chicago's not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame." And we finished the movie. It was done, sound mixed, color corrected. And then it was, I think, November, and I got a text from my sound guy, and he just goes, "Uh-oh." And it was Chicago got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I was like, I felt so great for the guys in the group, but I was also like, I'm going to have to open the edit now. And so we were premiering at Sedona International Film Festival a couple months later, and the Hall of Fame was going to happen a month after that or 2 months after that.
Yeah.
And so luckily for that, I just added a chyron at the bottom at the very end saying Chicago got into the Hall of Fame, and the whole audience just went nuts at the film festival. Then we won the festival at Sedona, and actually shortly after sold the movie to, if I might be remembering incorrectly, we still had to go and shoot the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame part, and then that was added into the movie at the end. And then that's what everyone has seen publicly, is that version of the movie that makes it look like was the original version. But we'd actually already finished the movie and then added the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in, because you can't release that a year after the Hall of Fame and them all complaining that they're not in, the David Fosters of the world, and they're actually in. It wouldn't have made sense. So
Yeah, but it's interesting, I mean, that's another way that movie business has changed. It used to be when a movie came out, it came out and everybody knew it. Now movies are out for 4 years. I didn't even know it was released. I watch it on TV. I lose track of when it was released. I see the little epigram at the end, like the ones you put up, and I go, okay, I get it now. It didn't matter that they were talking about they weren't in the Hall of Fame because at some point they got in. I don't know when.
it's true. It would have almost been kind of cool if we didn't have it and then people thought the movie was the reason they got in. But
yeah,
it all
would
kind of
be.
happened simultaneously. I think it was just kind of one of those. It also worked out because then we got to release the movie on the 50th anniversary. It was a month, yeah, a month before their 50th anniversary is when it came out.
Yeah.
So that kind of coincided too and made it look like it was on purpose. But I think we would have released the movie 3 years earlier if it was finished, you know?
Funny. When I do projects, I learn from everything I do. Do you think about it like that? Like, did you learn something significant from this project?
From this project specifically, I learned that if you've built up the skills beforehand, you really can. I used to see it in as an aside, the Seinfeld behind the scenes of all those DVDs in the past, where they described every episode was like running with an egg in a spoon, like you're running as fast as you can and you have to
Yeah.
get to the finish line without dropping the egg.
Yeah.
And that's what this project felt like, because the movie was almost completely done just back in February, and we needed to get some more footage to show them rehearsing the song "If This Is Goodbye" and make that the end of the film.
So
And
hold on a second. Take me
yeah,
through that. How you said it was almost finished, so it must have been almost finished in your mind.
it was done editing except for the ending
So
and the beginning.
who says and trumps you in some way? Oh no, it's not done. We need some footage of people rehearsing at the end, Peter.
Well, I had finished editing the pretty much the whole movie, but it was obvious that the song "If This Is Goodbye" in the middle of that movie, where it's showing them recording it, and there's very emotional moments from some of the guys in the group,
Yeah.
that it needed some kind of sandwiching in the
Need
movie.
to come back.
Yeah, and then I heard that they were going to be playing it live because the album was going to be coming out. I said, I think that I should bring a couple guys out and we can film that and I can get it edited into the movie, the very beginning, very end. And that's what we did. So we literally went to Las Vegas to film them rehearse and film some of their shows. And those nights, I go back to the hotel room and cut the footage together. And so the very beginning and very end of that movie were edited in probably 2-3 days, and sent it all to the color corrector and the sound mixer. And a week later, the movie was was done. But I think on this one, I learned to trust my skills as being able to do things kind of with your head cut off, and you can finish it, as opposed to the first movie where that one took probably, I mean, from start to finish, it was about 4 years, but it took a long time to edit to figure it out because there was also a lot more of finding archival footage and all that stuff. But with this movie, it was almost all of my footage. I mean, there was only very few news clips or whatever we had to pull and then clear.
Right.
So it was a very different process.
That egg on the spoon technique reminds me of the Francis Ford Coppola method. You know, he's talked so often about Apocalypse Now, and in many of his films, he's famous for starting films without having the funding.
He told his daughter too with Lost in Translation. She wasn't sure if Bill Murray was going to show up in Japan, and he's like, "Just go to Japan, start going, and
Yeah.
it'll work out." And she wins an Oscar. And
It reminds me, I borrow from other industries sometimes when I don't understand what's happening right in front of me. In basketball, they say, put the ball in play because nothing happens till the ball's in play. Um, and in the music business, so often you hear bands talk about how the best song on the album was the last one they record because the producer said to them, we don't have the hit yet. And the band's always, F you, there's all kinds of hits on this album, but okay, we'll try one more. And then that one turns out to be the big hit single. It's
well, how many times
fascinating.
have you heard the story of a guitarist just doing a warm up and the other guy going, "What's that?"
Yeah,
"Oh, it's just my warm up." I think that's Joe Walsh did that probably. I remember that being in the Eagles documentary. And then
that's right.
I think Sweet Child of Mine, same thing. It was
Yeah,
just a guitar warm up, and they're like, "That's a song."
yeah.
It comes from the id sometimes. You don't. You're right. It's you put the ball in play, and then a lot of the times your instincts will, if you've gained enough experience, so to speak, your instincts will create something that's better than maybe something you sat down and thought through a whole
You
bunch.
bet. So what's your creative process now? What are you working on?
I am working on a narrative feature film that is, can't talk too much about it. We have some pretty big names that are in talks, so to speak. It's you can't really talk about it until it's all settled and signed on. But that one is going to be maybe filming next year. But it's always the chicken or the egg thing. What comes first, the financing or the actors? And so this time we have the actors, and then half of the financing is there. We've got to get the other half. So
Okay.
that one's exciting, and I'm always working on different things. I mean, I am maybe shooting something here in Texas in a couple months, but I have to really think through that one to see if it's worth doing.
I read recently, it was a tweet, and somebody tweeted it like it was some sort of a revelation. Tom Cruise is working on two movies at the same time. I'm like, I hope so. He's Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
These things they're like what we call in the South a slow cook. You get it on the burner and something's working, and then you have to put this one aside for a while, and you go to this one. People are become
The one that I'm doing,
unavailable. A
yeah,
pandemic happens. All kinds of stuff, right?
the one I'm maybe doing in next year is I finished writing before the pandemic, and then I had been working on that for probably 4 years.
Wow.
Narratives are much different than documentaries because, especially this one, I had to do a lot of research to forget the research in order to write just a compelling story. Then COVID happens, and working the whole time trying to get these two pretty big name actors to agree to do it.
Yeah.
And then we shot a teaser for it, and now we're waiting. Funny, there's a bunch of interest, as people say, "Oh, people are interested," and they are, but it's just a matter of, like I said, we do have half of the budget committed, but it's a long process because at the same time I'm working on the Chicago documentary, and
Yeah.
you kind of have to. I heard Jack Black say it, or no, not Jack Black. Zach Galifianakis said it like a long time ago before he hit it big, where he just stopped caring. And I never knew what that meant until I think now. Like, you have to not give energy to the idea as it having to happen, because if you ever do that with any given one project, it's not that it won't happen, but you'll just kill yourself thinking about,
Hmm.
I need this to happen, versus just kind of having a good product available and then doing something else and having your value be tied into a bunch of different things rather than just one thing that has to happen.
You remind me of a book by Herb Cohen, negotiator. He's long gone now, but the title was How to Really, Really Care, but Not That Much.
Yeah, exactly. You have to put effort in. It's sort of it's sort of the secret in a way too. I mean, if you think about something a lot, it has to turn into action for it to actually become something.
Yeah.
And I think that's all. If people listened to The Secret or read The Secret and thought it was magic, but it's what it all it is if your mind's in the right mindset, you will inevitably act on it. If it becomes a habitual kind of thinking, it's the same way as I have a lot of anxiety. I mean, that's also a thing that's becomes a habit. If you think one way, you're going to be anxious, you know?
That's right.
So it's all a balancing act.
One last question before we go. This movie, Last Band on Stage, the story of Chicago's 55 plus years, constant touring and recording every single year. It's an amazing run. The movie is directed, edited, and produced by this Peter Curtis Pardini guy. Are you an auteur? Do you like doing it all, or did it just turn out that way?
Well, it was a necessity at first, but I guess at this point, definition wise, I guess I am an auteur in a way. But I'm seeing. I think everybody starts out as an auteur if they really want to make movies because you learn very early on that, especially if it's low budget, meaning no money, that no one's going to do everything for you unless you do it yourself. And now I'm finally getting to a point with, I mean, obviously with Chicago, I mean, they're just the best partners to work with because they let me do my thing, but they give me full access at the same time.
Yeah.
And I'm learning with this new project that I'm doing that I have actual producers this time who are doing a lot of the work that would stress the hell out of me. And now they're just doing it. And it's like, oh my God, thank you.
Yeah.
Someone else doing it now. So I am a bit of a control freak, but not in a way that's detrimental to the project. I will happily give people jobs to do if it's something that gives me more time to think about the creative side.
Well, you're an up and comer, man. These early projects that you've done are so important to the music world.
Thank you.
And I think maybe we'll see what the test of time does for your films, but maybe even for the film world that, some people, they go back and look at the first films that they did and they say, well, this was pretty close to a masterpiece when you consider all the stuff that went into it. But
Mm-hmm.
masterpieces kind of get judged with time, don't you think?
Totally. I mean, we did a movie a couple of years ago called Rolling Thunder that we shot in one day. It's a narrative feature film that the concept is kind of like a Project Greenlight, where we would write a really bad short film and then get real actors and a real crew to go to set. But the conceit would be that they'd be documented the entire time and improvising all day long. And I
Yeah.
thought, kind of experimental film, what if we just shot a whole feature in one day? How would it turn out? And it turned out pretty, I mean, I'm very happy with it. And I thought about it. I said, I want to retain rights on this because thinking about a Martin Scorsese's first movie or one of his first movies, Who's That Knocking at My Door? I mean, just profit wise over 60 years now, 55 years, that's had to have made so much money for him.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, people going back and seeing where it started, because you watch that movie or you watch Wes Anderson's Bottle Rocket or anybody's first movie that turned into the director they did, like you can see where they started and that they weren't polished yet,
Yeah.
but there's still that thing they do that's in there.
What was Spielberg's first movie, Duel?
Duel. And he did some stuff like I think he did the first episode of Columbo. He did like a lot of stuff like that.
Okay.
But yeah, it was Duel was his first movie. I think
But when you look back, you see, well, that was the beginning of Steven Spielberg, right? Just like
Yeah.
the beginning of Peter Pardini was Rolling Thunder, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, you're never as good as your taste when you start out, I
Yeah.
think is what it comes down to. And luckily for me, I made movies in high school that no one will ever see. But
We've all
thank
got those.
but we made movies in high school, and when I got to college and was making movies and I saw the other movies in class, I realized that, oh, thank God I made my bad first movie 5 years ago. You know what I mean? And I still wasn't good, but it's, you see people are starting, I basically got a 5 year head start on a lot of people and didn't realize I had until I saw the other stuff.
Yeah. Well, the new film is Last Band on Stage. It's the story of the legendary rock band Chicago and their 55 plus year run in the music business. It's directed, edited, and produced by Peter Curtis Pardini. Peter, thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And best of luck in the future, man. You're a shining star.
Thank you.